Cold Case Explorations is a true crime video channel and podcast. It is for educational and entertainment purposes only. This video or podcast may contain content that is not suitable for all listeners. Viewer discretion is advised.
It's been over 20 years since 9-year-old Asha Degree went missing from her Shelby, North Carolina home in the early morning hours of Valentine's Day in the year 2000. By all accounts, Asha was a happy girl, an honor student, and a point guard on her elementary school's basketball team. Everything changed on February 14, 2000. When her mother went to go wake Asha and her brother up for school, Asha was gone. Where did she go? Why did she leave in the middle of a rainstorm? And why did she leave her family behind? This is Cold Case Explorations podcast number 2, and as I briefly explained in the introduction, we're going to be talking about the disappearance of Asha Degree, a 9-year-old girl who was living in Shelby, North Carolina when she disappeared. This case is a more well-known one, and perhaps one of the most famous unsolved missing persons cases from North Carolina. It's tragic. A young child disappears from her home and is never seen again, and over 2 decades later, we still don't know what happened to her. Before we begin, I'd like to remind everyone that all of my articles are available online in their entirety for free on my website, coldcaseexplorations.com. If you enjoy my videos and podcasts, please consider liking and subscribing so that you can be alerted when I post more cold or unsolved case content in the future. With all that being said, come along with me, Cold Case Explorers, and let's discuss what might have happened to Shelby sweetheart Asha Degree. Asha Degree was born on August 5, 1990. She had a brother named O'Brien who was about a year older than her, and she lived with her father, Harold, and mother, Aquila. She was a 4th grader at Falston Elementary School at the time of her disappearance and loved basketball. Described as lighthearted and funny, she tried to be friends with everyone and was generally a likable girl. The only thing she didn't like were large dogs and the dark. Both Asha and her older brother, O'Brien, played basketball on their school's sports teams, and the siblings were often seen in their driveway shooting hoops. Asha played as a point guard on the Falston Elementary girls basketball team. From what I can tell, she was a happy girl with no disciplinary issues. The principal of Falston Elementary School described Asha as an honor student who rarely missed school. The fact that Asha was a happy honor student who didn't get into trouble only makes the case of her disappearance even more surprising. The days leading up to Asha's disappearance seemed pretty average. She was still her normal self over those days, according to family and friends. We'll start from February 11th, 2000, which was 3 days before Asha vanished. The children did not have school on Friday, February 11th, but they still had their respective basketball practices. Because their parents had to work, they stayed with their aunt, Asha Degree, who lived just down the street. After spending the day with her, they went to their basketball practices and then headed home afterward. On Saturday, February 12th, Asha's basketball team lost for the first time that season. She took the loss especially hard because she'd fouled out of the game. Harold and Aquila, Asha's parents, recalled that she was upset about the loss, but she managed to get over it enough to stay and watch her brother's game afterward. Her coach at the time, Chad Wilson, spoke of her demeanor after the game. Quote, "All the girls were crying, not just Asha, and they had a good cry afterward because it was the first loss. Just a few minutes later, she was up smiling and joking and having a good time. I sat behind her for part of the boys' game and tossed a towel over her head and joked with her." End quote. The next day, Sunday, February 13th, the Degree family attended church in the morning at Macedonia Missionary Baptist Church. After that, they headed to an aunt's house for lunch, then headed home. Asha received some Valentine's Day candy a day early, something she was reportedly very happy about. Since the children had school the next morning, their bedtime was supposed to be at 8:30 p.m. Asha and her older brother, O'Brien, 10 at the time, shared a bedroom. Power was out that night due to a car crash in the neighborhood earlier in the day. Later that night and into the early morning hours of February 14th, Asha's father, Harold, returned home at 12:30 a.m. after getting off of work. He checked in on the children when he got home and found them both asleep in their beds. By then, the power was back on, so he watched some TV. Harold checked in on them one last time at 2:30 a.m. before he went to sleep himself. Later, O'Brien said he heard Asha's bed squeak in the early morning hours, and he thought she might have gotten up to use the restroom at that time, or perhaps rolled over in her sleep. It would only be a few short hours later, at 5:30 a.m., that Aisha was discovered missing by her mother when Akula went to get the children up and ready for school. Trying not to panic, Harold suggested that perhaps Aisha had gone to her grandmother's house, as that was just across the street. However, once they checked in with the grandmother, she confirmed that Aisha wasn't there either. It was a wet, rainy, and cold morning, so Aisha's parents were instantly very concerned about their daughter being out in that weather. At that point, her parents called police to report Aisha as missing. Police investigated the Degrees' home and found that in addition to the doors being locked, there were no signs of forced entry or foul play. Furthermore, it seemed that Aisha had packed up some sets of clothing before leaving, leading investigators to believe that she probably left of her own volition. Later that day, scent dogs were brought in to help with the search. However, the canine units were unable to locate a scent trail to follow. A helicopter was also brought in to scan the surrounding areas, but it found no signs of Aisha. Other volunteers also searched for Aisha on foot and on horseback, trekking through the mud and grass in an effort to locate the girl. Volunteers and authorities alike spent untold hours searching the woods as well as looking under houses and in dumpsters. No one found anything that might lead them to Aisha. Detective Tim Adams said of the search, quote, "The fact that it was a small child that left on Valentine's Day really caught everybody's heart in this community. She's been called Shelby's sweetheart because she's a child that's one of our own," unquote. There are some reports that a young girl fitting Aisha's description was seen walking south on Highway 18 in Shelby around 4 a.m. on the morning of her disappearance. The sighting was said to have been near the Highway 180 intersection. Someone reported that she might have gotten into a car, but there are sparse details about this lead. Her family and friends have also stated that she was a careful girl, and therefore it would be unlikely that she would have gotten into a car with a stranger or someone else that she didn't know. Another witness said that he saw Aisha walk into a wooded area around 4 a.m. when he tried to approach her to see if she needed any help. As far as we know, that was the last confirmed sighting of Aisha. On February 15th, the day after Aisha went missing, a woman reported to police that she'd found some items in a shed that might have belonged to Aisha: a Mickey Mouse hair bow, a green marker, a pencil, and some candy wrappers. The candy wrappers were the same brand that were handed out at Aisha's basketball tournament, leading investigators to believe that the wrappers and other items were the missing girls. However, there was nothing else at the scene that could point them in the direction that Aisha might have gone. And that was it. Neither authorities nor volunteer searchers ever found anything else that might have pointed to where Aisha went. It wasn't until over a year later in August 2001 that another clue came to light. A backpack was found buried at a construction site in Burke County, later identified to be Aisha's backpack. Burke County is about 45 miles away or an hour drive from Shelby, where Aisha lived. The backpack was buried and stuffed into two black trash bags, one inside the other. After examination by authorities, the backpack was confirmed to be Aisha's, although the items left inside it were not. Her backpack contained a Dr. Seuss book and a New Kids on the Block t-shirt, neither of which belonged to Aisha. Interestingly, the book had been checked out from Fallston Elementary School, but not by Aisha. It's not clear if the identity of whoever checked out the book was ever made public. Although case updates have been few and far between, investigators aren't giving up hope that Aisha's case can one day be solved. Like so many cases where we have so few answers, theories abound, ranging from the plausible to the unlikely. Authorities and web sleuths alike have all sorts of hypotheses regarding this case. Theory number one: Aisha ran away and succumbed to the elements. Investigators point to the lack of tampering with doors and windows, as well as the fact that Aisha packed a bag to suggest that she ran away on her own. Even if this is the case, a 9-year-old girl isn't going to get far on foot unless she had some outside assistance. A huge search effort was launched relatively quickly after her disappearance, and it should have found some sign of her if she was wandering around outside and alone. Theory number two: Aisha ran away and was taken. Another variation of the Aisha ran away theory is that she voluntarily left the family home early that morning only to be kidnapped by someone who saw her walking near the road. Remember that Aisha's backpack was found over 40 miles away, a distance that a 9-year-old would be unlikely to cover unless she was in a car. Furthermore, the backpack was found buried, indicating that someone didn't want it to be found. It also contained items that didn't belong to Aisha, perhaps suggesting that someone else had used it in the time between her last sighting and the bag being found. Theory number three: a book is to blame. Some argue that a book Aisha read, called The Whipping Boy by Sid Fleischman, might have influenced her decision to run away. The book tells the tale of a commoner child who was whipped every time the young prince did something wrong. Both children ran away in the story, only to return safely to the kingdom by the end of the book. Aisha was described as an honor student, so I'm not sure she would have been so easily influenced by a book that she undoubtedly knew was fictional. Even if Aisha felt like the whipping boy from Fleischmann's book, I personally have a hard time believing that she would have up and left with just a backpack and some clothes, chasing fanciful words from a book she'd read. Theory number 4. One or both of the parents took Aisha. As I've mentioned in a number of my other cases, parents are more often than not the perpetrators when a child goes missing. However, there was no custody battle going on over Aisha, as is the case when a lot of children go missing but are really just kidnapped by the non-custodial parent. By all accounts, the Degrees were a happy family and they cooperated fully with the investigation to find their daughter. Even now, they haven't given up hope that they might one day see her again. Aquila, Aisha's mother, is quoted as saying in 2020, quote, "So we've missed everything, but I don't care. If she walked in the door right now, I wouldn't care what I miss. All I want is to see her." Unquote. At this point, I'm moving away from the facts and background of this case and delving into some more of my opinions, although I hinted at some of them earlier when I was discussing the theories in this case. This case is a troubling one because, realistically, we should have found Aisha by now. What I mean by that is that a 9-year-old wouldn't get far by themselves, even if they willingly ran away. I think most kids go through a stage where they want to run away from home for one reason or another. They pack a little bag with some toys and clothes and make a run for it, rarely getting further than the edge of the neighborhood. Most children are swiftly returned home, going back because they get scared or because they're found before they wander off too far. In Aisha's case, I think it might have started as this, an innocent attempt to run away, like so many children do. However, she might have ended up running into someone with more nefarious intentions, something she couldn't have known or predicted at such a young age. The fact that Aisha's backpack was found with a library book that was checked out from her own elementary school suggests to me that someone she knew, or was acquainted with, picked her up as she was walking down Highway 18. Perhaps this person was the parent of one of the other students at the school, or maybe even a teacher, janitor, or food service worker. Aisha was described as cautious by her parents, and they both agreed that she wouldn't have gotten into a car with a stranger. What if it was someone she recognized from the school, though? She might have been more willing to go along with them, especially after a few hours of walking in the cold rain with little more than her long sleeve white shirt and jeans to keep her warm. Additionally, remember that Aisha's backpack was buried and stuffed into not one, but two black trash bags. This indicates to me that whoever buried it probably didn't want it to be found. They even got rid of the bag so hastily that they forgot to remove other items from it before they buried it. Perhaps they got spooked by the amount of media attention that Aisha's disappearance was getting and quickly tried to dispose of the bag. Getting into a car with the wrong person, someone she thought she could trust, could have had terrible consequences for young Aisha. Again, I don't know for sure, but based on the evidence and the research I've done, this seems like the most likely scenario. Random child kidnappings, while statistically rare, are still awful and tragic situations for a family to have to endure. In the over 2 decades since Aisha's disappearance, there have been some case updates and discoveries. However, none of them have led to the location of Aisha. In 2004, an inmate at the Cleveland County Jail claimed to have killed Aisha and buried her. Investigators went to the supposed burial site, but they only found animal remains. Nothing at the site had anything to do with Aisha or her disappearance. In 2015, a tip came in that reported seeing Aisha get into a green car on the morning of her disappearance. An ABC 15 News report explained, quote, "Investigators believe that the car that may have picked Aisha up was a 1970s model Lincoln Continental Mark IV or a Ford Thunderbird with rust around the wheel wells," unquote. From what I can gather, no additional information came from this lead. In 2020, another inmate wrote to the Shelby Star claiming to know what happened to Aisha. Marcus Mellon, 53 at the time of writing the letter, was convicted of sex crimes involving minors in 2014. He reportedly wrote, quote, "Asha Degree has been missing for over 20 years. About 4 months ago, I had found out her whereabouts and what had happened to her. She was killed and then took and buried. I do know how and what town she is in. I hope you get this letter and do come see me. It's on the up and up." End quote. Despite the letter, there have been no more updates or discoveries on Aisha's case. Investigators did follow some leads, but they aren't sure that Mellon has any actual information on Aisha's disappearance. The sad fact is that inmates often will claim to have knowledge of other cases in the hope of receiving better treatment or reduced sentences for their own. There's still a $45,000 reward available for information leading to the location of Asha Degree. At the time of her disappearance, Asha was 4'6" and weighed about 60 pounds. She is African American and was believed to have been wearing a white shirt, white jeans, white tennis shoes, and had a black Tweety Bird backpack on. Those with information should contact investigators at 704-484-4788 or FBI Charlotte at 704-672-6100. When it's been over 2 decades, it can seem like there's no hope of solving the case, but I think that there is still a chance that Asha's case can be solved. Someone out there knows something, saw something, or heard something. Most of all, my heart breaks for Asha's family and loved ones who, even 2 decades on, don't know what happened to their daughter. A family has been deprived of their little girl for long enough. I hope that, one day, this case can and will be solved. Aquila told a media outlet of her daughter's unsolved disappearance, quote, "This is worse than death, because, at least with death, you have closure. You can go to a gravesite, or if you have the urn at home. But for us, we can't mourn. We can't give up. The only thing we got is hope." Unquote. What do you think happened to Asha Degree? Is Asha still alive today? And do you think that Asha will ever be found? Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. That brings us to the end of our case coverage for today. I greatly appreciate your support and engagement. If you enjoyed this video or podcast, consider liking and subscribing for more cold or unsolved case content. And as a reminder, you can view all of my articles and videos on my website, coldcaseexplorations.com. Thank you so much, Cold Case Explorers. Keep exploring, keep wondering, and keep seeking the truth.